Daniel, you're afraid, aren't you?
You don't seem to understand. We may be cut off. But this is absurd. Did you hear that?
Welcome to Kermode Uncut. One of the things I like to be able to do on this blog is to alert you when there are reissues on the big screen, something that you may have missed that you can catch finally on the big screen. The Old Dark House, the James Whale film, is getting a theatrical re-release prior to a Blu-ray release here in the UK. And if you haven't seen it, and many people haven't, it is really well worth checking out. Old Dark House is based on a novel by J.B. Priestley. The novel itself was a kind of post-war psychological horror, and it was sort of shell-shocked and dark and strange. The James Whale film is quite brilliant and quite different. For one thing, it's much more enjoyable. The story is, well, it's a kind of classic story. It's a group of travelers, they're suddenly lost, they need to take refuge somewhere. They take refuge in the Old Dark House, and in the Old Dark House they encounter inhabitants, all of whom are strange and weird and kooky. There's madmen running around on the loose, there's creaky stairs, there's flickering lights, there's shadowy corridors everywhere. You've seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's basically that story. It's the archetypal Old Dark House story. When the film was first released, it got mixed reviews, and by mixed reviews I mean genuinely mixed reviews. Now if you say something got mixed reviews, it means it was reviewed badly. When it first came out in the early 1930s, some people liked it, other people didn't. It divided audiences. It was often compared to Frankenstein, and often not favourably so. And then it was re-released, I think, at the end of the 30s and seemed to sort of disappear. Later on in the 1960s, William Castle went back and remade that story, and that version then became the version of the story that everybody remembered, and for a while the James Whale version was considered, to all intents and purposes, lost. I remember reading about it in an encyclopedia of horror. Maybe it was the Dennis Gifford Encyclopedia of Horror back in the 1970s when I was first watching horror movies. And I started going to screenings at places like the Phoenix and the Scala, and they would often do revivals of movies, but Old Dark House didn't seem to turn up. I know that Eastman House had a print of it from the late 1960s onwards, but it really wasn't in circulation. But we'd all heard about it by reputation, and its reputation was growing. People were starting to say it was an overlooked gem. People were starting to say it was a lost classic. People were starting to call it one of the greatest horror movies ever made. Well, now it's back in a 4K restoration. I think the restoration was done last year. So it's going to get a proper cinematic release. It's playing in a number of towns, playing a number of dates, and then it's going to come up on Blu-ray. But if you get a chance to see it on the big screen, please do. It's now got a number of very high-profile champions, people like Edgar Wright. Why? Well, because it's one of those films that absolutely rides on the cusp of, on the one hand, being archetypal, and on the other hand, being parodic. It is like it is simultaneously setting in motion a certain kind of chiller movie, but also doing it knowingly, doing it with a certain degree of distance, as if it is at once setting these things up and simultaneously satirizing them. The film itself really stands the test of time. To see it in a 4K restoration on a big screen is an absolute treat. And I remember being a kid in the 1970s, reading about this film, I think reading that somebody said it no longer existed, or to all intents and purposes you couldn't see it anymore, and thinking, wow, what a shame, everyone who sees it seems to like it so much. Well, now it's back. Don't miss this opportunity. Old Dark House back in cinemas. Go see it. You won't regret it.